Welcome to Savingforcollege.com's College Savings Month webcast. Thank you so much for joining us today to learn more about 529 plans and other ways to save and pay for college. Before we get started, I'd like to take a minute to thank our sponsor, College Savings Bank. College Savings Bank, a division of Next Bank SSB, seeks to help customers save towards future higher education expenses. Residents of all 50 states are able to save in the FDIC-insured tax advantage 529 programs managed by College Savings Bank. Arizona Family College Savings Program Bank Plan and College Choice CD 529 Savings Plan. Products include certificate of deposit and high-yield savings accounts. They welcome conservative savers, late savers, and savers who value the diverse 529 portfolio. Member FDIC. I'm very excited to introduce our moderator for today's event. Jean Chatzky is the financial editor of NBC's Today Show, host of Her Money podcast on iTunes, AARP's personal finance ambassador, and award-winning author. Thank you again to College Savings Bank, Jean, and the three panelists for helping out on this important event today. And so with that, I hand it over to you, Jean, to start.
Thanks, Marie, and thank you everybody for joining us. I'm so excited to see that we've got such a great turnout. Let me tell you a little bit about the panelists who are here to answer your questions today. They're already coming in, which is fantastic. We want your participation, and we'll do our very best to get to as many questions as we possibly can. Just a little bit about each of our panelists. Shannon Vasconcelos is Director of College Finance at College Coach, which is the nation's leading provider of educational advisory services to organizations and to families. At College Coach, she delivers workshops and provides individual counseling on the college finance process to employees at over 100 companies nationwide. So she's our go-to when it comes to saving for college, paying for college, education loan repayment, maximizing the tax break, financial aid, and scholarship resources. Shannon, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Jean.
Mark Struthers. He's the only guy that you'll see here today. He is a fee-only financial advisor, a CFP, as well as a CFA. He's a workplace wellness coach at Sona Financial and a member of NAPFA, the National Association of Personal Financial Advisors. This plays a valuable role when it comes to college and student loan planning because it allows him to take a truly holistic approach and focus on the service and the process over product and sales. And for that reason, we are just thrilled to have him here today. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Jean. Wonderful.
And Katie Flynn is Content Director at Savingforcollege.com, a leading resource of unbiased information on 529 college savings plans and other ways to save and pay for college. She's written so many articles about 529 plans, published on Savingforcollege.com and other personal finance websites. She is the editor of their weekly consumer newsletter, which if you don't get, you should be getting, and bi-weekly 529 Pro update. Katie, thank you for organizing this, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you too, Jean, and thanks Mark and Shannon also. I think it's going to be a great event today.
So before we go to our questions, we have the ability to poll all of you in the audience. We are almost at 400 people, which is great. I think we'll probably have more as the hour goes along. I'm going to launch a poll question. Technology, not my strong suit, but I will do my best here. And let's see. I'd love it if everybody could answer this question to get us going. Which of these do you use or plan to use to save for college? Select one of the following: a 529, a Roth IRA, regular savings account, or other. And the results are coming in. We've got about 72% who voted. I'm going to give it just another minute. Here we go. And the results are that 86% are using a 529 plan, 3% the Roth IRA, 4% a regular savings account, 7% other. You can see that right there. Katie, why don't I ask you to just jump in here and tell us what are the advantages of each of these types of savings mechanisms?
Okay, well, I'll start with the 529 plan since that seems to be the most popular, which is great. Because, you know, we really do believe that that is the best way to save for college. It offers income tax breaks, so all of your earnings in a 529 plan, if you use the money to pay for college, all those earnings will go tax-free, and they won't be taxed when you withdraw. 34 states offer additional state tax benefits for residents who make contributions. Another great thing about a 529 plan is that the owner will stay in control of the account for the life of the account. So that doesn't matter if the beneficiary becomes an adult, it doesn't matter. The owner still retains control. So you can change it to another beneficiary if something were to happen down the line. They're very flexible. You get 2 investment changes per year. You can roll over into another 529 account once per 12-month period. And another great thing is everyone is eligible. A lot of these other savings vehicles have income limits. There are no income limits for 529 plans, so it doesn't matter how rich you are, how poor you are. It doesn't matter. Anyone can use them.
Bonnie Carroll asked a question about what's the most unique benefit currently offered by a college savings plan. So while you're on the topic of 529s, maybe you can tell us what's the most unique one.
I think the most unique one would probably be the state tax benefits, just because I don't think any other of these vehicles offer that. So, for example, if you live in Illinois, like I do, married couples filing jointly can take a tax deduction for contributions up to $20,000 per year. So depending on your state, go check it out. They might offer something like that. And yeah, like I said, no other savings vehicle will do that.
Okay. And anything that you want to say about these other vehicles, the Roth or a regular savings account?
Sure. I mean, they all have their benefits, especially Roths are great. It's a great savings tool for retirement. It's a great supplement maybe to a college savings plan, but there are a few key differences. Like I said, Roths do have income limits, so if you make a certain amount, you are not qualified to receive the benefits of the Roth. Still offers that federal tax-free savings, but couple different things related to financial aid that Shannon might also want to touch on. Your earnings in the Roth will be counted as untaxed income, which does not happen on the FAFSA, and that won't happen with a 529 plan. Also, when you withdraw from a Roth to pay for college, that's also going to be counted as income on your FAFSA, whereas a 529 plan withdrawals are not counted on the FAFSA. So that's a pretty important difference.
Absolutely. All right, let's go to another question. They're coming in, which we appreciate. This is from Bridget, and she says she's a big fan of Her Money, which is my podcast, so thank you for that, Bridget. If you're not listening to Her Money and you're interested in this, you would love it. Thank you, Shannon, for the endorsement. Okay, Bridget writes that she's got 11 and 14-year-old daughters. Her husband and she earn too much to qualify for need-based scholarships or grants, but they're still struggling with saving enough for college, and I think there are a lot of people in that boat. She says, we have been told to aim for $40,000 in today's dollars annual tuition for a private school on the East Coast. Many colleges are $50,000 to $60,000 this year. I believe the $40,000 target was reached because many schools reduced their tuition for good grades. Nevertheless, I'm concerned we'll fall short of what we need to send them to school. I just finished paying my own student loan, so I feel strongly that I would like them to avoid borrowing if all possible, and my husband and I are not eager to borrow any money ourselves. Mark, let me turn this one to you. How do you know what's the right goal when it comes to setting a savings target?
Well, you don't know for sure because there's so many variables. As she mentioned, 40,000 from what I've had clients, I work virtually, so I have clients, even though I'm in Minnesota, I have clients from Massachusetts, actually, where Shannon's from. And school can run quite a bit more. So she might be talking about the net price versus the COA. So the first thing parents can do is see what the net price might look like and realize what goes into that calculation. And then basically coming up with a plan. You can tell I'm a holistic advisor. That means looking at all your available resources. I have clients of the full income spectrum, but even high earners have competing forces like retirement. A lot of them are just paying off their student loans. Even a doctor might be making quite a bit, but had $200,000 in student loans. So it's a matter of mapping out what you can do and what the future might look like. Running through some scenarios saying what schools might be open to us and how might we combine saving for that college and saving for retirement while making sure your financial core, your emergency fund, your cash flow, your day-to-day budget is intact. One option, if she's on the East Coast, is Massachusetts has a great prepaid plan. So if she wanted to lock in some of those tuition certificates to lock in that inflation, assuming it's there, and it most likely will be, that could be an option. So it's a matter of seeing what's available, what the real cost is going to be, and coming up with the best scenario, knowing that nothing's perfect. We don't know what the taxes are going to be. We don't know what inflation is going to be like on her case, well, 7-8 years. So it's a matter of running through the scenarios. I mean, in this case, luckily, FAFSA is not an issue. So finding out the best course of action and then revisiting it, knowing it's dynamic, revisiting it each year.
While we're talking about the FAFSA, Shannon, we got a question from Keat, and I hope I pronounced that right, basically asking, is it true middle-income families don't qualify for financial aid and the FAFSA is not helpful? A lot of confusion around the FAFSA.
Yeah, and a lot of the confusion, I think, stems from the fact that the formula that goes along with awarding financial aid is, in fact, complicated. So there's not a real exact income cutoff where I can tell you at this income level you're definitely going to qualify for financial aid, at this level you won't. And it also really depends on the way this question was phrased, that do middle income families not qualify for aid? A lot depends on what your definition of middle income is. People have very, very different definitions of that. And the other thing that it depends a lot upon is the cost of the school. At the higher cost private colleges, your income can go much higher and you still may have some need-based financial aid eligibility. When pressed for really, kind of exact numbers, and please, I'm going to say right now these numbers are not exact, but to give folks kind of a ballpark idea, I tend to say at a public college, incomes much over 100,000 are not going to qualify for need-based financial aid. And at some public colleges, really, your income has to be well less than that. At the more expensive private schools, your income can go up to more like around 200,000, and there might be some need-based aid eligibility. If you have more than one child in college, those numbers actually go even higher. So a lot depends. Mark actually, I think, briefly mentioned the fact that there are now net price calculators on every college's website. So the fact that you may or may not end up qualifying for need-based financial aid shouldn't come actually as a surprise to anyone anymore. You can go to any college's website right now, plug in your basic financial information, and it will give you a pretty good estimate of whether or not you're going to qualify for financial aid and how much. So I definitely recommend that every family that I work with play with those net price calculators on the website of any college that they're interested in. And also just to point out that all of those the income levels, your income and your assets are only entering the equation when we're talking about need-based financial aid. The other big pot of money that most colleges have are merit scholarships. And those are generally not based on a family's finances at all. So if like in our last question, it seemed like the person asking the question was pretty confident that they weren't going to qualify for need-based aid. There's absolutely still ways to apply to colleges strategically where your child's going to stand out a bit to really maximize merit scholarship possibilities so you're not looking at paying full sticker price.
And that involves the FAFSA as well, correct?
At most schools, it actually does not, but you're absolutely right, Jean, that there are some schools that do require the FAFSA for merit scholarship consideration. So if you're a family that is, higher income and you're thinking about not doing the FAFSA, I would definitely check in with the schools that your child is applying to make sure it's not required for merit scholarship consideration. Again, usually it isn't, but there are some schools that do ask for it. You want to make sure that you're not leaving money on the table, so definitely check with the schools before you decide not to fill out the FAFSA.
Okay, great. Thank you, Shannon. A question from Kathryn. Is it advisable for a grandparent to contribute to the parent's 529 plan rather than create their own? Katie, this one I guess is for you.
Sure. There's pros and cons to both. So a grandparent may want to open their own 529 account if their state offers a tax benefit. So if a grandparent wants to open it in their own name and name the grandchild as the beneficiary, there's no problem with doing that. They can collect their tax deduction. The other issue, though, is when it comes time to pay for the child's college, as I mentioned before, if a third party contributes to a child's college, it's going to count as student income on the FAFSA. So that's going to hurt your expected family contribution. You'll be expected to pay more out of your own pocket. So in that case, you may want to consider, a grandparent may want to consider just making contributions to a parent-owned 529 plan, because if a parent-owned 529 plan will not have that effect.
Okay, while we're on 529s, Katie, if we have a 529, and this is a question from Barbara, if we have a 529 and a regular savings account in both the child's name and parent's name, what do we spend down first?
I would say spend on the 529 plan first, only because if you don't spend that money toward college, your earnings will get hit with income tax and a 10% penalty. So, or you can just keep it in the account. But if you want to use that money for college, I would use it first, because the money in your regular savings account can be used for anything you want.
Okay. All right. Great. Let's talk about the investments in your college savings account, whatever you're trying to use. Muthu writes, what's best to invest for a 7-year-old? Aggressive portfolio or target date funds? I currently have an aggressive portfolio. Bank.
Roughly 10 or 11 years left. And that is one of the struggles of college funding, is your time horizon is so short. And your spend down period is short. Retirement, you have arguably 40 years and hopefully another 30 to spend it down. So with that short time horizon comes more risk. Your aggressive portfolio, the word aggressive is vague, so it depends on your provider. So first of all, take a look at your provider. Savingforcollege.com has unbelievable resources that makes it really simple to drill down into some of these investments and see what the allocation is, because their version of aggressive might be different than mine. But in most cases, if you're aggressively invested, it's probably mostly equities, and it could be international, small cap, and emerging markets. The reason I bring up those asset classes is they are more volatile. And that's where the point I'm getting to is it all depends on your level of risk. If you want to get an idea of your risk tolerance, you can take a look at the fund you're at and see how it did in 2009. If I had to guess, that aggressive portfolio probably lost about 50% of its value in 2009. So you have to ask yourself, are you comfortable with that? And are you comfortable with that as you approach college? The idea of this college funding, the reason it's so difficult is you have to take risk off the table as you approach college, because most people can't afford the volatility anymore. So that's the tricky part. Your child's 7, you still have her, and you do want to take advantage of the magic of compounding and the growth of capital investments, but with that growth comes risk, and you want to make sure you're in a position to fund college when you get closer. So whether or not it's right for you, I can't say. I can say be aware of the risks of that aggressive a portfolio, and switching to an age-based isn't always foolproof. While it does take risk off the table, they all take risk off the table in a different way. And if the timing is off on those age-based funds, as I've had several clients who bought in right before 2009. So when they had that drop in equities, that 50% drop, their fund started selling off because their child was a certain age where the glide path changed. So they were locking in losses, which if you're saving for retirement, because you have a longer time horizon, it's not as impactful and it can even out. So I don't want to get too technical, but it's something where you need to be aware of risks on both sides. Aggressive portfolio can be really a great way of growing assets. And if you have other assets to access, if things don't look good right before she starts, where you can put it off for a couple years, that might be beneficial. Otherwise, if you don't have the risk tolerance, then definitely do something age-based or each year yourself, just slowly take risk off the table. I hope that wasn't too complicated.
No, not at all. Not at all. We've got a question from Bradley about a Coverdell education savings account. And he wants to know, can a Coverdell be rolled into a 529 and are there tax consequences? Shannon, do you want to take this?
Yes, a Coverdell can. You can move money into a 529 and there are actually no tax consequences to that as long as you do the rollover in a timely manner, which I believe is within 60 days. You can make that change without consequences. And just to step back a bit for any folks on the line wondering what a Coverdell is, just to make sure that we do cover the Coverdell. A Coverdell is another type of college savings account, very similar to the 529 in the federal tax treatment, where all the earnings of the account are tax-free. Differs in a few ways. One nice feature of the Coverdell is that you have almost unlimited investment options. Unlike with a 529, you're limited to a certain menu of funds. The other nice benefit to a Coverdell is you can actually use it tax-free for private elementary and high school, not just college, whereas the 529 is restricted just to college. Coverdells do have some big limitations to them, however. Only folks at certain income levels, and if you're married filing jointly, I believe it's less than $220,000 are allowed to contribute to a Coverdell account. And if you are at the income where you're allowed to contribute, the most you can contribute is $2,000 a year, unlike 529s, which are unlimited. So I think Coverdells tend to serve in a much more limited capacity these days. Most folks saving for college are tending towards the 529 instead.
We've got a number of questions about how do you pick the best 529, how do you use savingforcollege.com to pick the best 529, and as a sort of tangent, why use an advisor sold 529 when a similar and maybe cheaper option is available directly? So Katie, let me let you talk about the first part of the question. How do you use the site to pick the best plan for you? And Mark, maybe you can weigh in on advisor sold plans as opposed to others.
Sure. Yeah, savingforcollege.com has so much information on every 529 plan out there. So it's a great place to start. We usually recommend starting by checking out your home state's plan just to see if they offer any types of incentives. Could be a state tax deduction, could be a state tax credit, you never know, so check that out. Then what you want to do, we have a really nice compare tool where you can actually look at different plans side by side. You can look at their performance rankings, historical performance, and then also we have what's called a 5-cap rating, and it's 5 little graduation caps, and we will give each plan a rating. We'll give it a resident rating and a non-resident rating, so if you are looking at an out-of-state plan, you can see how those measure up, and they look at things like historical performance, different features offered by the plan, costs. We want to check out fees as well. So while you're doing that, you definitely want to look at things I said. We also have a fee study where we look at the different lowest cost options of all the different plans, and then you can sort and rank to see which ones offer the lowest cost options. We also show every plan's investment options for each of their underlying portfolios. So when you sign up for a direct sold plan, say you want to invest in the New York plan, you don't just click a button and it's New York plan. You're going to actually have to pick your investment options. So you want to pick, am I doing the age-based? Am I doing a regular static portfolio? So it's good to research all those different portfolios and make sure you're signing up, you understand what you're signing up for, and it's the most appropriate for your child or whoever you're saving for.
And Mark?
Yes, the advisor's role, it depends on what value he's bringing to the table. It depends on what you're paying for. Part of the problem you've seen with 529 plans advisor sold is the plans that are advisor sold, sometimes advisor, that might, the fee associated with it might drive his choice. He might be picking a plan that's in a state not yours, and you might have a state tax deduction or credit. For example, Shannon and I, our states just recently this year, a wonderful state tax deduction credit now. In years past, most brokerage firms will actually have the advisor have you fill out a form acknowledging there's no state tax benefit, and that's why you're going to this other plan. So that's sometimes you see that. If the advisor is choosing a plan that, say, an S&P 500 is a common equity index plan, and it should be low cost because it's fairly easy to manage. If he's choosing that plan and there's a fee associated with it, you need to ask yourself what value is he bringing? Is he explaining the process to you? You bring value in a number of different ways. It's a matter of what value he's bringing to the table. If it's a case of you chose the plan or you chose the fund and it's in your state and there really was no option, that's a good question. It's a valid thing to bring up. But yes, a low cost, if you're going for a low cost, very basic index, they call it passive type plan, then the cost should be your only factor because you're not looking for the bells and whistles. If I put together a combination of an ESA like Shannon was talking about, where I choose, say, individual bonds, something more complex with an aggressive growth 529 plan, then I'm bringing more value to the table. I'm balancing a lot of risk and return. But if you're simply buying an S&P 500 type index passive investment, you have to ask yourself what value the advisor's being for what you're bringing to the table for what you're paying for.
Just a follow-up to you, Mark. When is that appropriate? When does somebody want to look at a more complicated, I guess, approach to solving for this problem?
I'm a holistic planner at a CFA, so I love putting all these pieces together, but most people don't have the time. So the complexity can make things very efficient. We talk about the use of the Roth, like in the first poll question. I use Roth and I bonds as a supplement to 529 plans because I don't think the correct question is retirement planning or education funding. To me, the question is, what's the role of the parent? If the role of the parent's involved at all, then the finances at some point of the child are going to affect the parent. So it's about making the most of those pieces. The problem is if an individual tries to put these pieces together themselves, the complexity sometimes can cause more harm than good, especially when you have things changing like Shannon and I have with our states. All of a sudden, clients I had that we went to other states to use their 529 plans because you're not tied to your own, where you're making the most of the assets available to you. I now have to go into them and say, let's change course. We now have a great tax credit and or deduction. Let's go that path. So it all depends on how complex you get. And part of that is the assets available too. If you're able just to set aside $25 a month and that's all you can do because you have your emergency fund, you have your cash flow and budgeting, then you're probably better off keeping it simple. But if you have, like the lady in Boston, who I'm guessing is a high earner, she's probably shooting for something close to $300,000 or $200,000 in private school tuition, then you need to get more creative, especially if you're balancing retirement, because that's where that holistic piece comes in to say, first we take from this bucket, and then if the child needs more, then my role might be this, and this is what retirement looks like at that point. This is what my emergency fund looks like at that point, knowing none of it's guaranteed, knowing that we're adjusting as we go and we're making the most out of an uncertain future.
Okay, let's launch another poll question and then we'll come back to your questions. This one is, saving in a 529 plan will affect financial aid. Is that true or false? I wish I had Jeopardy music for you all. The answers are coming in. Gonna give it another few seconds. And there we go. We will close it off. And let's see. Okay, so 65% of people say that it will affect financial aid. 35% say it won't affect financial aid. That is not at all definitive. So, Shannon or Katie, do you want to take that one?
We need a drum roll.
Right, yeah. So I think this actually sort of a trick question, because I think the real answer is that saving for college in a 529 may affect your financial aid eligibility, but probably not by as much as you would think. There's incorporated into the federal financial aid formula is something called an asset protection allowance, which actually excludes from the financial aid calculations the first chunk of your savings, no matter where it is, in a 529 or elsewhere. And that number, the amount of your savings that's protected from the calculations can vary depending on actually the parent's age, but it tends to be in the ballpark of something like $20,000 to $30,000 is not looked at all. So if you're saving moderate amounts of money, it is not going to hurt you one bit in the financial aid process. If you're saving larger amounts of money, which is fabulous, the additional savings will get looked at in the financial aid formula, but to a pretty small extent. The financial aid formula looks at kind of two basic types of money: your income and your assets. And it is really your income that drives the formula. When people don't qualify for financial aid, it is almost always because of their income, not because of what they have saved. Any savings in the parent's name, and 529s count as a parent asset in the financial aid formula, you're expected to contribute anywhere from 0, like I said, to 6% of those assets per year to college. So essentially having, an excess, $10,000 in a 529 beyond that asset protection allowance might cost you $600 of financial aid. So it really affects the financial aid calculations very little. So that people always ask me that, like, why should I bother saving for college? It's just going to cost me financial aid. It really costs you very little. And you can imagine, having that $10,000 in savings helps you pay for college much, much more than the maybe loss of $600 of financial aid. So I always encourage people to save for college. Again, in the parent name, savings in the kid's name actually has a much more harsh treatment by the financial aid formula. But again, 529s are considered parent assets, treated very gently by the financial aid formula.
Okay, we're getting a lot of questions on withdrawals as well. This one's from Michelle. She wants to know, when should I use my 529 funds? The first year, the last year, or spread out over 4 years? And Shannon, let me send that one to you as well.
Yeah, so this one, it doesn't have a real straightforward answer that I can say for sure for everybody. You should do one or the other. I think Katie referenced earlier that the big risk with the 529 is that it has to be used for college, otherwise you get hit with taxes and penalties. So you want to make darn sure that you do end up spending this money on college. So that would argue towards spending the money as soon as possible, using it up on that first year. But there are some other sort of competing priorities as well. Like any account with tax-free growth, that tax advantage is maximized by leaving the money in the account as long as possible. So that's kind of a competing argument. That would say, leave it for the last year, use it then. I think for most people, it probably makes sense to space it out, divide it up over 4 years, especially if you think, you have to think about where are you coming up with the rest of the money. If you don't have it all in a 529 ready to go, how are you paying the rest of the bill? If you used it all up in the first year, you likely are going to have to borrow significant sums in future years. But maybe if you could space it out over 4 years, maybe the excess that you have to pay, maybe you can take a look at your cash flow, your monthly budget, and pay the rest on a monthly payment plan to the college, and that will help you avoid borrowing. So there's not a real definitive answer. I think for most people it maybe makes sense to kind of space it out, but you do have to worry about that penalty if you don't end up using it. So, what happens if your kids if your child drops out of college? So that again would argue towards using it sooner rather than later. Oh, the other thing that I should mention on this point is there's a tax credit called the American Opportunity Credit for parents paying for their kids' college. And the IRS does not let you double dip and take basically 2 tax breaks for the same money. So you actually want to make sure if you've got kind of enough in your 529 to pay for the first year, you probably actually want to hold a little bit back in the 529, save it for the second year to make sure you're paying at least $4,000 out of pocket, out of some other type of account, because you need to pay. Well, to maximize your American Opportunity Credit, you would have to pay $4,000 out of some non-tax advantaged account. So I always tell people if they're going to qualify for that tax credit, which there are some income limitations to it, but you don't want to pay it all out of the 529, save a little bit of that 529 for the next year to make sure you can take the tax credit.
Okay, great. Mark, Julie wants to know, how much should you be saving toward retirement before you start saving for college?
Good question, and it's a passionate debate among many as far as college versus retirement. I don't like that question, to be honest. I think the better question from a holistic standpoint is, what is the parent's role? If the parent's role is going to be involved in the student's financial education investment, then it has to be factored into their overall financial health. I do think the parent has to make sure that their financial core, and I keep saying emergency fund, budgeting, debt management, no bad debt, and part of that is a retirement plan. But in very few cases, almost none, should you have your retirement completely funded before you start saving for college. No one has the time and, frankly, resources for that. Lifestyle creep goes in there too. Even if you do save up the money, all of a sudden you're spending more. So there is no set number. I think it's a matter of saying, what is my role going to be? What might college costs look like, and how might I prepare for it using both? I don't think you can ignore college funding, not when it's increased much more than inflation, much more than wages. It's a much bigger part of our life. That's why some of these improvements in 529 plans have been so impactful. But it's a matter of incorporating it into your retirement funding. So what I find with a lot of clients is they'll start off saying, okay, let's pick a general date for retirement. What does it take to get there? What resources do I have? 401k, take advantage of employer match. You can go down the list, Roth IRA. And then let's use the 529 plan for maybe a quarter to a half, maybe for 1 to 2 years of a in-state school, full COA, full cost of attendance. That's a pretty good place to start, and then you revisit it every so often. And if you're doing that and the rest of your financial body is healthy, then you're able to make adjustments to handle that other piece of the financial body, which is the education. So there is no set answer, but I think taking a holistic approach, realizing most parents are not going to ignore their child's college education. If the child gets in debt and is bankrupt at 30, they're probably going to end up on the couch at home. So there's a financial liability, and you got to account for it and try to balance the two.
Okay. A couple of questions coming in about 529 withdrawals and how they're counted when filling out the FAFSA. Do they count as income for the beneficiary? And is there a difference in parent-owned 529s and grandparent-owned 529s? Shannon, you're nodding, so I'll go to you.
I'm chomping at the bit to answer that question. Yeah, so in most cases, it's a parent that owns the 529, and as long as it's the parent that owns the 529, that 529 shows up as a parent asset, which again has a gentle treatment, but the withdrawals do not show up as income at all, as long as they are withdrawals made by the custodial parent of this student. And so the custodial thing can get a little bit tricky when parents are divorced. So again, 529 is a great place to have the money when it's in the parent's name. It's the parent's 529. Things get tricky for financial aid when it's not the parent, not the custodial parent that owns the 529. When it's a grandparent or a non-custodial parent, when parents are divorced, that's when withdrawals do show up as income on a future financial aid application. They ask on the FAFSA form, they ask the student, did you receive any gifts or have any bills paid on your behalf by anyone other than your custodial parent? And if so, report it here. We're going to count it as student income. Student income is hit very hard in the financial aid applications. One sort of nice thing is that income actually doesn't kind of come back to haunt you on a financial aid application until 2 years in the future. So when a grandparent has a 529 for their grandchild and they want to help them pay for college, the timing actually becomes critical of when they make those withdrawals, when they pay the tuition bill out of that 529. Because income doesn't show up on a financial aid application until 2 years in the future, essentially any payments grandma makes towards a student tuition for freshman year hurts them on their junior year financial aid application. Whatever they pay towards sophomore year hurts them on their senior year financial aid application, give or take. And then there are no more financial aid applications. So grandma can actually pay whatever she wants towards junior and senior years of college without it having any effect on financial aid whatsoever. So grandparents should definitely think about the timing of when they're making these college payments. If grandma's got, small to moderate size 529, it's not going to cover the whole college education, but it's going to cover some of it. They might want to save it to use for the last couple years of college in order to minimize the financial aid effect.
Does it ever make sense for grandparents to transfer ownership to parents?
Yep, that can certainly, in terms of the financial aid, that can help. So now it will show up as a parent asset, but again, the parent assets have a pretty gentle treatment. So yeah, that's absolutely one option that grandparents can do. Transferring ownership can help, or saving for the last couple years, that can help. Yeah, that can be a good option for some people.
Okay. This question is from David. What happens to unused funds in a 529 plan? Should I be concerned about having too much in a 529, especially if expenditures are not quite clear due to age and or other payment possibilities, scholarships, the GI Bill, etc.? Mark, you want to take that?
Yes. Well, it's a good problem to have. You don't see it very often. But there is you would pay ordinary income tax on the gain, just the gain, and a 10% penalty if not used for qualified education expenses. So it's something that I struggle with clients all the time because we have so many unknowns. And education inflation education and healthcare have been two things that have been inflating. Things like wages have not. So when you map out the scenarios of what might happen, that's something to take into account. I would offer a word of caution when you look at this, again, making sure other pieces of your financial body, your financial pie are healthy and in place. Look at the worst case scenario. If the worst case scenario is that you had a tax deferred investment and you had to pay taxes on it, well, then it's really more like an IRA, and then the downside is, well, it's a 10% penalty. So you have to weigh how big a downside that is to you. Sometimes people hear penalty or they shut down instantly without looking at the big picture, the holistic picture. So you got to look at what exactly, and it's 10% just on the gain. So if your portfolio returned 10% compounded over 20 years, that's pretty great. And if you're overfunded because of itself, you could wait till you retire. There's no time limit. So the 529 plan, there's very few accounts like it. The only one I can think of is maybe an HSA where it truly has a lot of power. So even if the worst case scenario is a 10% penalty, think about what the impact of that really is, map out the numbers, but also think about other family members. And Shannon can talk more about the list of eligible beneficiary members is very large, including yourself. And I have lots of clients who say, yeah, my wife's from Spain. If we don't use it, we're going back. We're taking cooking classes in Paris or something. So
Yeah, and I'll just jump in for a second. If the child does get a scholarship, that penalty is waived. So GI Bill counts as a scholarship as well. So then you will not have to worry about that 10% penalty on the earnings. You'll just get your income tax.
A question from Marie and Katie, while you're on the hot seat, maybe you can take this one too. Is it too late to open a 529 if your kids are already in college?
It's not too late. Whether or not it's the right tool for that time probably depends on your situation, because as we mentioned, one of the benefits is the compound growth, which is maximized over time. So if they're already in college, you won't see that much of a benefit. However, you might still be able to collect your tax deduction if that's available. So that would be, some people like to just funnel the money through and get their tax break and use it straight for college.
So and a follow-up on that one from the same person, and Mark, maybe you can answer this. So if your kids are already in school, what's the best way to save? Mark, I'm not hearing you. I don't know if anybody else is. Can you?
Sorry about that.
One more time.
Sorry about that. For me, it's all about risk and possible outcomes. Katie made a good point. Take advantage of your free money, which would be the tax credit or deduction, much like your 401k match. Beyond that, you have to ask what your investment is and what's the risk with that investment. If they're already in college, your risk tolerance is probably pretty low because you most likely don't want a lot of volatility when you might need to access the funds quickly. So you certainly can look at a 529 plan. A lot of plans have very safe investments such as stable value, or sometimes they call it guaranteed interest contracts, which are kind of like money markets with insurance wrappers, which you maybe get a slightly higher return, but that return is smaller. So you need to make sure that the fees and so forth are worth all that, and that you're for sure going to use the funds. If there's doubt and you need to access the funds, you probably need to look at something else that you can access more quickly, that has more liquidity to it, where you don't have to worry about any issues getting to the funds or any volatility or any tax consequences. And also add, if your only benefit is the tax deferral of 1% over a couple years, that value to you might not be there given the other things that go along with a 529 plan. Okay.
I love this next question. It's from Brad, but we've gotten several along these lines. He said he's considering establishing credit freezes after the recent Equifax breach. Very good idea, by the way. What impact will that have on applying for financial aid? Shannon.
Yeah, so it won't have any impact on the initial financial aid application process. That does not involve a credit check at all. You fill out the FAFSA, sent into the schools, they figure out what kind of aid you're eligible for. That is all absolutely unaffected. Where it can, and also what would also be unaffected is any of the government student loans that students can borrow directly in their name. They call them the direct loans, the Stafford loans. There's kind of a limited amount of money, like $5,500 to $7,500 a year, that every U.S. citizen essentially can borrow. And those loans are absolutely unaffected as well because they don't involve a credit check. They're very automatic as long as you file a FAFSA. Where it can come into play is later on in the process if the parents are needing to borrow a loan to help supplement the funding for the child's education. Any loans beyond that, like $5,500 to $7,500 that the student can borrow that are very automatic, any loans beyond that are going to be credit-based loans. So they will have to pull your credit to determine if you're eligible for loan funding beyond that. So this, in case we do have parents listening, of parents of high school seniors who are kind of going through the process right now, it's not an immediate concern, but it will become a concern come springtime. So sort of late spring into early summer is when you're actually getting the loans to fund that if your child's going to college next fall. That's when it's going to become an issue. That's when you will have to at least temporarily lift the freeze if you're going to need to apply for loans for college. So not an immediate concern unless there are any folks with existing college students who are trying to get some funding right now. It's not an immediate concern for most people, but if you do have a child who will be going to college next year, it will become a concern in the spring into summer, where you may have to temporarily unfreeze your credit so you can get those college loans.
Excellent. All right, we're going to do one more poll question, and then we'll take a few more questions, and then we have a giveaway at the end. I don't want to forget that. I am confident that I will be able to meet my college savings goals. True or false? Here come our answers. Give it a couple more seconds here. And we'll close this out right here. Sharing the results. Oh, so that's a very nice, even, fairly even split. Mark, does that surprise you?
Yeah, it does. Given there's so many unknowns, the closer you get to college, the more clarity you have, and the more easier it is to put pieces into place. So as odd as it sounds, I think 44% is pretty good. We need to get it more. We need it higher. We need to get more people saving early and often, and not just saving, but planning, getting their core financial wellness in place and saving. But yeah, I guess I'm encouraged. I have clients who are not just young parents, but also those who are dealing with the repercussions of student loans, dealing with income-based repayment or public service loan forgiveness, which are great options if you have to use them. But ideally, we want to put our kids, most of us want to put our kids in the best possible place. And it's just a small piece of the college financing puzzle.
We've got a question from Nikki about when and how somebody other than the account owner can contribute to a 529 and how they do that. I love the idea of using a 529 for some birthday gifts and Christmas gifts, other than holiday gifts, other than just buying stuff. So what's the easiest way to make that a reality? Katie, you want to take that?
Sure. I love it too. It's a great idea for a gift. There's a couple different ways you can do it. I mean, obviously you can just give a check to the parents or whoever the account owner is, and they can make their own deposit. And then there's different plans offer different ways for gifting contributions. So they might have some plans that can actually send out an email request where you can do an electronic deposit into someone else's plan. There's the gift of college gift cards that you can buy at retail stores that people can put towards their 529. So there's a couple different ways, but they're all very easy. And I think the best place to start would be to talk to the parent or the account owner and see who the provider is and what options are available. But yes, it's very easy.
And I'll just throw in from my experience, because I've got 529s for my two little kids, and the 529 that we use absolutely has that option where we've kind of got all the family members' email addresses plugged into our account online, and when birthdays come around, Christmas roll around, I just press a button and it sends an email saying, Grayson would love the gift of college savings. If you're looking for a gift idea for him, please contribute to his 529. And my family has been surprisingly generous. I found that people love doing this. It's kind of exciting for them to kind of work as a team to save for the child's college. So I can't emphasize enough. I love that option. I tell everyone I know about it. It's a really fun way. And for anyone with little kids, you know that you don't need any more toys around the house. I can barely walk 2 feet without tripping over toys. What we really need is some help paying for college. So it's a great, great option. And many 529s make it really, really easy to do.
True. And then when you do it that way, you're not, the parents won't be tempted to spend it on something else. So I think everyone likes that direct route right into the account.
I'll
Mark,
also say, getting everyone engaged, I think, is a wonderful idea. I've seen it in real time where normally they wouldn't have the conversations. People do get excited. Grandparents do get excited about it. And just starting the conversation with the child as well. A lot of the questions come in as to, we don't know what college we're going to. Well, you don't usually know for sure, but if you can start the child talking about what college they might go to, how much it's going to cost, what the income afterwards might be like, your return on investment, and talk about how you're going to pay for it. I think doing what they described, if just the starting, the saving, especially if you can even use social media to try to a web page or a Facebook page to try to get the family engaged, that can start conversations that can lead to a lot better outcomes than kind of just keeping money in the closet and not discussing what a big investment this is for the
We've got a couple of questions about switching between 529 plans without penalty, as well as diversifying among 529 plans. Does it make sense to, like you have different mutual funds, have different 529s? And Mark, can you talk to both of these issues?
Yes, absolutely. I do use different 529 plans, especially up until now. Minnesota did not have the tax debit or credit or deduction or credit, so it was a little bit easier call. It comes back to what you asked earlier about the complexity. You can't let, if it gets too complex, parents may not stick to it, or it might become unwieldy for them. But if you can use the best of the investments that the particular states have to offer, most people don't realize this, is that each state puts their 529 plan up for bid. So you have different providers who have a wide array of investments. The wide array of investment can sometimes cause paralysis from analysis. You have too much to choose from, so you shut down. But if you do have the time and inclination to make the most out of those investments and your state's free money, that's the best scenario. And again, it's dynamic and you revisit it each year, but making the most of your account types, your tax situation, you go down the list, making the most of your resources and liabilities produces the best outcome, but you have to be willing to control it. And there is a value to simplicity. It's like having old 401ks other places. They might be fine. They might have good investment options that are working good together. But if you lose track of them and your risk tolerance is out of whack, then they've done more harm than good.
Okay, one more for you, and then I think we'll go to our giveaway. And that is a couple of questions about how do you find somebody to help you select these plans, plan for college in general. In other words, how do you find a financial advisor who is reputable these days?
Great question. Well, if you're doing it yourself, savingforcollege.com is one of the best resources. I will say I have a lot of clients who are very well educated, much smarter than me, very hardworking, but even they have a lot of misconceptions, probably because they just don't have time. This isn't their sandbox. So it's like drinking from a fire hose, and sometimes information out there is not always accurate. So having some reliable resources, first of all, even to verify what your financial advisor is telling you, is invaluable. Secondly, I am a little bit biased. I am a fee-only, fee-based advisor. NAPFA, the National Association of Personal Financial Advisors, is fee-based. The reason we are is we try to avoid conflicts of interest. So a lot of us you can go to us and just buy an hour of our time and say, give me your opinion on this. So the part of the struggle 529 plans have had historically, as they've evolved over the last 20 years, is financial advisors who are commission-based are put in an awkward situation because there's very little revenue for them to make a choice, and if they do, they're making a biased choice in some cases. So you can, if you have a financial advisor you trust that's local, go there. Otherwise, an organization like the National Association of Personal Financial Advisors, who vet their advisors, who are fiduciaries, meaning they're legally bound to act in your best interest, and most of us structure our practices so we take away conflicts of interest. The other organization would be XY Planning Network. I'm a member of both. XY Planning Network, as the name implies, is Generation X and Y. So 30-somethings like Shannon or 40-somethings like me is their target market. We work a lot with families. They too have a screening process. They too are fiduciaries. They too try to offer fee-only advice, and many work on an hourly basis, which can be beneficial for young families. And they also have other either assets under management or retainer models. So I hope those are two good places to start your search. It's a matter of finding someone that you trust, that's affordable, that can get you in the right direction.
We also have a directory at savingforcollege.com. Yep, you'll see that's called Find a 529 Pro. If you see that button, you can find someone local to your area. And these advisors are people that have expressed an interest in helping you plan for college. So they're specifically interested in that vertical. So in addition to what Mark said, I think that would also be a good place to start.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you, Katie. I want to thank all of you for doing this today. This was terrific. The hour just flew. And before we wrap it up, the winner from our sponsor of the wireless earbuds is Aaron Velasco. And I hope that I didn't butcher the pronunciation of your name, but the lovely Katie Flynn will make sure that you get these earbuds. And thank you, everyone, for watching.
Bye.
Thank you. Happy saving.